Have you ever felt like you are not disabled enough to be actually disabled, but you are clearly too disabled to be considered normal? Do you find that you are sometimes the harshest judge of your autism and your ADHD? Like maybe you're holding yourself to standards that are completely impossible for you just to prove that your autism and ADHD aren't excuses. Are you consistently trying to frame your auDHD as a superpower instead of acknowledging the ways it can limit and frustrate you? If you answered yes to any of these, then congratulations, you probably deal with something called internalized ableism, which is absolutely not your fault. We live in a deeply ableist society. And today we're gonna unpack what ableism is, what internalized ableism is, and what the heck we can do about it. Hi, hello there. My name is Megan, and I am an author, content creator, and life coach for autistic and ADHD adults like myself. And today we're gonna talk about why you are so hard on yourself for being a neurodivergent human. And let me give you a hint, it's not your fault. So let's break things down, starting with what is just regular run-of-the-mill ableism. Generally speaking, this is the belief that it is better to not be disabled than it is to be disabled. And this shows up in the world of physical disability for sure, but it can also show up in the world of neurodivergence. Whether or not you consider your own autism and ADHD to be a disability, ableism does show up in the world of autism and ADHD. Let me give you an example. Put the raise hand emoji in the comments if you have ever had someone tell you,
ADHD isn't an excuse to be lazy.
Because the assumption is that we are lazy and we are using our ADHD as an excuse for that, rather than approaching with curiosity and saying, oh, you struggle with that? I don't. That's very interesting. I wonder why there's that difference there. Instead of looking at the way ADHDers approach executive functioning skills as being different and potentially disabling, we view it as bad. We view it as lazy. Another example of ableism in our society is the overemphasis on finding out what causes autism. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't look into what causes autism and how different factors play a part. I think that's fascinating and interesting and important research. But when we are focusing on the cause of autism, or heck, even finding a cure for autism, at the expense of actually supporting real life autistic people with the struggles and experiences we are having right now, I think that's where ableism can come into play, where it's this idea of, well, if we find out what's causing it, we can stop people from being autistic, which is something called eugenics. Eugenics is kind of the big bad boss of ableism. Eugenics says that some people are more worthy of passing on their DNA than other people. And this absolutely shows up in the world of disability. A lot of people say, if disability makes life harder, shouldn't we want to get rid of disability? Shouldn't we want everyone to be able-bodied, able-minded? Personally, I think no. Now, I don't speak for the entire disabled community, but I think disabled voices are really important. And I think trying to get rid of disabled people by telling us we can't have kids or shouldn't have kids because we might pass on our disability is really fucked up. Because if you think about it, what you're saying is you shouldn't have a child like you. Someone like you shouldn't exist. And that's horrible. I don't believe in that. And at the same time, I know there are a lot of disabled people out there who would love to not be disabled. Heck, I know I have those days where I'm like, God, take the autism and ADHD away. Like, I don't want it. And I get that, which is why I think looking for causes and cures is not a terrible thing to do. However, we need to radically shift how we think and talk about disability in order to make the use of a cure for autism, for example, ethical. Because here's the thing. If I had been offered a cure for autism when I was 11 and I was in middle school and I didn't understand what was going on like 90% of the time, social stuff never made sense, my emotions were everywhere, and I felt so incredibly wrong. If someone had offered me a cure back then, I would have taken it in a heartbeat. Whereas now, at age 31, 20 years later, understanding my autism, understanding neurodiversity, I personally would not take a cure, and I feel that I would have been coerced into taking it through bullying and through social pressure as a child who was so markedly different. So I think if we're going to introduce things like cures, we need to change how we talk about disability so that taking a cure, getting rid of your disability, is something neutral, not something you're socially obligated to do. And this leads really nicely into my next point, which is what is internalized ableism? See, that 11-year-old child, she thought she was wrong. She thought she was an objectively incorrect human being. And that is when we take ableism, all about like disability being bad, being different being bad, and we internalize it. We hear all this stuff in the media, in the news, from our parents, teachers, coaches, and we take all of it and we make it about ourselves. This is really natural and very human, right? Like humans are inherently egocentric beings to a certain degree. We make everything about us, but it's especially about you if you always felt different, if you always felt weird, if you always felt odd. And this can lead to not even fully understanding your own disability or even acknowledging it. Because here's the thing, you don't think, oh, okay, I struggle with social stuff and I struggle with my emotions and, you know, I'm always fidgeting and messing around and stuff like that. You don't see all of that and think, oh, must be autism and ADHD, because we don't get enough education about those things. Instead, what internalized ableism does is it takes all of those things and says there's something wrong with you and who you are. Even if our disability is super obvious, a lot of times we just don't see it. Partially because we don't have enough education about these things, but also partially because, like I said before, there's a lot of ableism that says being disabled is bad. And so a lot of us just don't even want to go there. We don't even consider that possibility. And the result of this is just an inordinate amount of shame. We are constantly trying to make up for who we are, as if who we are naturally is objectively bad and incorrect and wrong, and we have to fix it. We have to do better than everyone else to make up for our deficiencies. Now, if you're thinking, Megan, I've never really thought this way about myself, but I do relate to the stuff you said at the beginning of the video, that might be because your internalized ableism is subconscious or unconscious, which just means you've been taking in all these messages of ableism without processing them consciously, like actively thinking about them. Instead, they just get tucked away and they form your belief system about the world. A lot of what goes on in our brains is kind of automatic and happens without our permission or observation. But we have to start paying attention to our own internalized ableism because it can ruin not just our life, but the lives of people in our communities as well. What are you doing? Oh, me? I'm working on a resource roundup for one of my one-on-one clients. What is a resource roundup? It's a really cool collection of Instagram accounts, academic articles, online tests they can take, podcast episode, YouTube channels, and so many more resources that pertain specifically to what we've talked about in our sessions. That actually sounds really helpful. What do you put in a resource roundup? Well, for this particular client, we are primarily focusing on shame and stories we tell ourselves about who we are and how we can tell stories that are more helpful, more honest, and more compassionate to ourselves. That's kind of awesome. Yeah, but I mean, for some of my clients, we focus a lot more on productivity. For other clients, we focus on emotional dysregulation. And for other clients, we focus on interpersonal relationships. It's super, super customizable when you work with me one-on-one. So what should people do if they're watching right now and they want their own resource roundup? They want to work with you. Oh, they can just go to the description and book a discovery call with me. I love meeting with people before I decide to work with them just to make sure we're a good fit. Oh yeah, get back to work and we'll get back to the video. Oh yeah, thanks, okay. Internalized ableism makes our life way harder. Because here's the thing, not wanting to be disabled and actually not being disabled are not the same thing. And if you just don't want to be disabled, you don't want to deal with the things that are making your life harder, believe me, I get that. I have plenty of avoidant tendencies myself. But what usually happens is trying to shove your disability under the surface is like trying to keep a beach ball underwater. You can do it for a bit, but the deeper you go, the more likely it's going to pop up and smack you in the face. And it'll be way more painful and frustrating than if you just let the beach ball exist on the surface of the waves. In other words, when you live in a society that doesn't understand you, you're probably going to be tempted to hide all of the things that make you different or the things that society might judge you for. But it's really hard to accommodate your disability and get access to what you really need and to achieve your goals and to be the person you want to be if you don't even know who you are because you're ignoring this entire part of you that is your disability. And not only does internalized ableism harm yourself and your relationship with yourself, it also harms others in your communities. You might think,
Megan, no, I'm the only one who's being lazy and bad and stupid. Everybody else with ADHD and autism is fine.
But that internalized ableism is going to slip out, either in the way you speak to others or in how you treat them or in how you treat yourself around them. This is especially true for parents. The way we treat ourselves is the way our kids learn to treat themselves. And so when we are dealing with internalized ableism, we teach our kids that same internalized ableism. Now, as we learn to understand our internalized ableism and start healing it, there's often sort of a stepping stone on the way to really grappling with our ableism, and that is lateral ableism. This is where we see certain disabilities as okay and acceptable, and other disabilities as not okay or not acceptable. For example, a lot of people in the autism and ADHD communities really can be harsh on folks with personality disorders, and that is a form of lateral ableism. Another example is how we tend to be a lot more forgiving and understanding of disabilities that you are born with compared to disabilities that you acquire later in life. Another example we see in the autism community a lot is how some people are way more accepting of like mild or like level 1 autism and tend to think a lot more harshly about like what is sometimes called profound or like level 3 autism. And that is major lateral ableism because all autism is autism. And yes, our differences matter, obviously, but we can't say that one form of autism is fine and the other form is a problem. I think we all need to be together. Lateral ableism hurts our community. We are all disabled together. And here's the thing. The disability community is one of the only ones that you can join at any point in your life and almost certainly will if you are lucky enough to grow old. So it's not enough to just accept our own disability. We really have to do the work to deconstruct our internalized ableism towards others as well. So how do we do that? First and foremost, you want to learn from those most impacted. Just so you know, that's not me. And I love doing education on this channel, and I hope that you learn a lot, but I want to acknowledge that I am not among the most impacted in the disabled community, in the autism and ADHD communities. I am a white woman living in the Midwest in the United States. I have a ton of privileges that can protect me from ways that having ADHD and being autistic might cause me harm. I really hope that my work is helping you deconstruct some internalized ableism and lateral ableism, but if you want to learn even more, seek out autistic people who have medium or high support needs. Learn from people of color who are neurodivergent in some way, and trust them to be the authorities on their experience, not you. Another great way to start untangling ableism is to replace judgment with curiosity. For example, if you are struggling to keep up with your work deadlines, instead of judging yourself for that immediately, get curious. What about these deadlines isn't working? What about your environment isn't working? What about your brain maybe isn't working with you the way you want it to be? Curiosity will almost always lead you to a more correct, more helpful answer than judgment. Another great strategy is to remember that you're not lowering the bar for yourself, you're changing the game. A lot of autistic and ADHD people I know really hesitate to untangle their ableism because they think it is correct. They think if they give themselves accommodations, then they're lowering their expectations. They're allowing themselves to be less than they could be. And I just think this is so false. You become more of who you are when you let yourself have needs and you fulfill those needs. I like to compare it to sports, even though I am not really a sports girly. I feel like neurotypical people are playing tennis, for example. They have tennis equipment, they play by tennis rules, and success for them is defined by how you win the game of tennis. And ADHDers, for example, might be playing baseball. If you try to play baseball with tennis equipment, by tennis rules, by tennis definitions of success, of winning, you are going to struggle immensely. So when you meet your needs, you're not saying, oh, here, I'll make it easier for you to play tennis. You're saying, no, I'm gonna let you play baseball, which is what you're designed to play, what you're meant to play. Internalized ableism will have you believing that you suck, or that your struggles are your fault, or that it's better to fit into our white supremacist, sexist, ableist society. But here's the truth. Every single person is who they are, and they need what they need. There is no hierarchy of worth amongst the humans on Earth. No matter what the fascist oligarchs want you to believe, you matter. And your needs deserve to be met, even if those needs are difficult or unusual. You are good enough. I'll see you all next week.